A very, very good evening to you. It's Tuesday the 24th of September and I'm Martin Daubney covering for the big man Nigel Farage. Tonight's show, Starmer's slip of the tongue has proven to be the most memorable moment from his speech at the Labour Party conference earlier today. Yes, the Prime Minister presumably means to say hostages called for the return of all sausages from Gaza. And after weeks of gloomy messaging from the Labour Party, the Prime Minister also vowed that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. Is this wishful thinking, or could Labour turn around an abysmal start to their parliamentary term? And the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has vowed to halve knife crime across the UK in a decade with a ban on ninja swords and also the introduction of youth hubs. Soon I'll be speaking to a grandmother and knife crime campaigner whose grandson tragically lost his life in a fatal zombie knife attack. And coming up later in the show, in a GBNews exclusive, we'll lift the lid on Labour's murky property deal that's seen luxury apartments going for double the market rate handed to homeless people in Farnborough from London. An astonishing story that's leaving local people on housing lists out in the cold. We'll have the whistleblower of this story exclusively live on the show shortly. And all of that to come, but first is your news headlines, and it's Sophia Wensley.
Martin, thank you. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines at 7 o'clock. Change has begun. That's a message from Sir Keir Starmer as he gave his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister this afternoon. He outlined a vision for national renewal, including reforming planning, ending the doctors' strike and launching Great British Energy, which he confirmed would be based in Aberdeen. The Labour leader also pledged to house all veterans in need, saying homes will be there for heroes. He also defended winter fuel payment cuts, saying every pensioner will be better off. Sir Keir Starmer went on to address the riots across the UK, sparked by the stabbings in Southport.
I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our community. The debate is not about the worth of migrants. That is toxic, but we must move beyond it. It's about control of migration. It's always been about control.
But the speech didn't go completely smoothly, with the Prime Minister making an embarrassing gaffe when referring to the return of hostages in Gaza. He said sausages instead.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages.
And it hasn't gone unnoticed, with Conservative leadership hopeful Tom Tugendhat saying Sir Keir Starmer simply can't deliver.
Look, that was a banger of a speech, but he can't even cook up a decent line. I mean, the problem is he's really made a complete hash of it, hasn't he? And none of it's worked out at all. All he's done is he's demonstrated the arrogance of somebody who simply can't deliver. Frankly, he's fried the whole thing in bananas and made a complete mess of it.
Meanwhile, the Home Secretary says Labour is a party of law and order, vowing to crack down on street crime, targeting offenders like street drinkers and shoplifters. Opening the third day of the Labour conference in Liverpool, Yvette Cooper's pledged to introduce Ronan's Law, banning ninja swords, which earned her a standing ovation. She also promised buffer zones around abortion clinics. And the Defence Secretary John Healey has chaired an emergency Cobra meeting to discuss the escalating crisis in the Middle East, while the Prime Minister has called for restraint and de-escalation. It comes as Israeli airstrikes continue to hit Hezbollah positions, with the Israeli military claiming it has killed Hezbollah commander Ibrahim Mohammed Koubazi in an airstrike on Beirut. At least 550 people, including women and children, have been killed so far in Lebanon's deadliest 24 hours in decades. 500,000 people have fled southern Lebanon, airlines have cancelled dozens of flights, and Lebanese hospitals are overwhelmed with more than 1,800 wounded. Speaking after the Cobra meeting, John Healey advised British nationals to leave the region.
Well, our concern is always for the safety of British nationals, and our advice to them is to leave Lebanon now. That hasn't changed, and this was a meeting simply to make sure that we've got plans in place for future developments.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Now, welcome to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for Nigel Farage, the big man, tonight. Now, the Prime Minister delivered his speech at the Labour Party conference earlier today. Sir Keir Starmer said that the country faces a shared struggle and that his project, while tough in the short term, is the right thing to do for the country. He also announced several new policies, including a much-lauded Homes for Heroes project for veterans, the Hillsborough Law, which will be introduced in April, and that GB Energy will be based in Aberdeen. Now, he's also been taking a battering for a sausage-related slip-up.
The return of the sausages.
Now, please do send in your favourite sausage-related puns to me. Email farage@gbnews.com. Be a bag of chips for the best. Now, joining me now from the Labour Party conference is the former Labour advisor, Matthew Talbot. Matthew, welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. Of course, we like to make mischief about these slip-ups, the sausage-related battering not going amiss out here in TV land. But on the ground there, do you think the speech gave enough optimism? A lot of us were hoping there'd be light at the end of the tunnel rather than this endless dour Project Doom from Sir Keir Starmer. Was there enough light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I think Keir's, I heard earlier from a lot of delegates, Keir's obviously not one of the best orators in the world. He's never going to give a tub-thumping speech like Gordon Brown, and he's maybe not going to be as inspirational as maybe a Tony Blair. But I think, I'd give the speech a 7 out of 10. It's fine. There was a little bit of stuff for the Labour members talking about sort of arts and culture and access to that. There was obviously a little bit of red meat. I think he may be starting to realise that reform are obviously a little bit of an issue for him, and showing a little bit of ankle by talking about Homes for Heroes and ensuring that veterans are going to be cared for in that sense. I think he was okay. I think he was trying to tell some hard truths because it's going to be a long road ahead for the Labour Party.
Matthew Talbot, you're a bloke, same as me. Sorry if I'm misgendering you. No man likes to be called fine or okay. I mean, seriously, mate, people were wanting this sunlit uplands approach. It may have gone down very well with the party faithful. It's a conference. That is a home stadium for him. Do you think, though, people have every right to be disappointed in the rhetoric that Sir Keir Starmer was doubling down, echoing Yvette Cooper earlier on, talking back about the racism, the violent racist thugs that terrorised our communities, about, of course, these Southport riots? Matthew, you and I have spoken before about, is there going to be a period of reflection, of engaging with those working class communities in 7 of the most deprived towns in England with the most asylum seekers of any constituencies? They have valid concerns about immigration. They weren't listened to for many, many years. No one's excusing the rioting, but today, Sir Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, they weren't in listening mode about that. They were projecting outwards, saying, you're all racists.
Well, I didn't see what Yvette said. You'll have to excuse me on that. If it was similar to what Keir said, I think I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt. Like me, we both sort of have similar views on this, in that, people have legitimate frustrations and they've seen their areas change, and, they feel that it's happening too quick. But I think you did say the minority of people, and I think even within those that were maybe swept up in the recent riots and stuff like that, or went down out of frustration, there was a minority who, may have been throwing stuff at the police, trying to set fire to hotels, or looking for people to attack who were black or brown, it seemed.
Matthew, the opinion polls aren't looking good. The personal popularity of Sir Keir Starmer is absolutely tanking. It's at an all-time low, and 20% of Labour voters regret their votes just a few weeks into Sir Keir Starmer's premiership. There's a long, long road ahead. Is Sir Keir Starmer the right man? 60% of voters yesterday said they don't think he'll even be leading the Labour Party into the next general election.
Yeah, I mean, that will remain to be seen. I think maybe he didn't help himself. I think there's two things, though. I think, first of all, that's to sort of suggest that Keir was popular in the first place. I don't think Keir Starmer's ever actually been popular. I think what we saw in the general election of 2024 was actually a very large protest vote. There wasn't necessarily much love for Labour, and I think there's now been research released from John Curtis and others that showed that. It was actually, I think, one in three Reform vote, 1 in 3 Tory 2019 voters voted Reform. 1 in 6 voted Labour. And I think on the other flip side, I think the general public don't have the patience after 14 years of a Conservative government where they don't feel necessarily better off to then be told by the man they sort of placed their trust in but wasn't sure about, for him to say, well, it's going to get much worse, guys. So I think that was a bit of an early faux pas when you need to earn that trust and offer some hope. But, you know, typical politicians answer no, but polls will go up and down, and I suppose as we see the budget and other measures that will hopefully gain confidence with the public, you know, you may see an improvement following conference and onwards.
Yeah, thank you very much. 7 out of 10, mostly okay, was never really that popular, fine. Matthew, that was superb. You're damning with faint praise there. Matthew Torbett, thanks for joining us live from the conference there in Liverpool. Now, back to studio. I'm joined by my superb panel, former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moore and also Philip Blond, the former advisor to David Cameron. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Can I start with you, Philip? You've written a lot of speeches for various prime ministers, various leaders in the past. Today, we're all focusing on that one slip of the tongue, the city sausage moment from Sir Keir Starmer. Putting that to one side, in terms of the meat on the bones, how good a speech do you think it was?
Between 5 and 6 out of 10, I would say. I think it was primarily intended to reassure the membership and the new MPs in the room that they have a mission and a purpose, and that was its directed audience. It was also, I think, to try to dampen down the internal criticisms, ally the party around it. So I think, in a way, the target was wrong of the speech. He should really, I think, have been trying to speak more to the country. And I think that if you want to speak to the country, you've got to speak to the intuition that all people have. And the intuition that all people have is, I think, that there are systemic problems in this country. The Conservative government was a failure. It was between a failure and a disaster. But it was that because it didn't confront reality. And what I think Starmer needs to do is to talk about, just to get a bit technical, the genuine productivity crisis in this country, the genuine sense of economic disenfranchisement, cultural insecurity, and the sense of the country no longer being sure of what it is or what it stands for. And I don't think he did that. And I think that's where I think the target of the speech was wrong. And I think, therefore, the speech didn't deliver to what the Labour Party really needs, because the structural problem the Labour Party face is they don't have a guiding philosophy. It isn't clear to us what they stand for. And that was the problem if you look back to Rishi Sunak. He was a technocrat. He couldn't articulate a vision, and so people deserted him. Politics is ultimately a big picture business. You've got to paint a vision of where you want to get to, and it's got to be compelling, it's got to be romantic, and it's got to be idealistic. And all we weren't told the real source of the problems, so we didn't feel we confronted reality. We were just told, in essence, it's technocratic management and it's likely to be very difficult. And I think they put themselves in a dreadful position by having George Osborne's economic policy allied with kind of Labour's aspiration for something very, very different.
Lloyd, what was your take? So we're hearing there from Philip, a speech without vision.
Well, I think actually the speech did exactly what it was saying it should do, which is it's saying that our country has lost its way, and I think that is the zeitgeist of the feeling of the country, and that you have put in the hard yards over austerity, over COVID, over the cost of living. The country is constantly saying to hard-working people, do better, do harder, but there is no reward. there's no gain for it. In fact, things are just getting worse. And under Labour, we're not going to stop saying you've still got to pull out the stops and work hard. But what we're saying is if you work hard, there will be reward. The government's going to work hard, there will be reward.
Until you're a pensioner?
No. In the next 5 years. In the next 5 years, there's going to be a hard graft that we're all going to have to put our hands into our pockets and really, take out all the loose change and spend it, all that kind of stuff. And then there is going to be a reward down the line. But he's saying that there is not going to be an immediate turnaround, because if you said... and the other message, he says, is that we're fed up of snake oil salesmen. So he says, we're fed up with snake oil salesmen, clowns, performers. We need people who are actually going to do the hard graft. And so that means that I'm not going to be the usual clown and performer that you see. I'm going to be doing the hard graft.
But the problem is, and I take what you said, is really successful political leaders analyse the problem in a way that ordinary people can understand. That's what Mrs Thatcher did. That's what Tony Blair did. This is rather like a doctor coming in and saying, God, you're really ill. You're much iller than I thought. It's really ill. And I don't really know what's wrong with you, is the subtext. That's honestly how I read it. Yeah. And because Labour haven't offered an at-depth analysis of how we got to this dire situation, other than it's the dreadful Tories, and a lot of it was the dreadful Tories. It's the failure of the free market model. Yeah. But there's no sense of a deep alternative to that order, and I think
exactly
that's what.
So he does. That's
why I think the speech didn't hit its mark.
He does the analysis. He says the free market can't resolve these things. We need to intervene. He says that explicitly, and then he says that we will relink this idea that if you put the hard work in, you will get rewarded. He says that's what happened when he was young, that it was expected that you had a better life than your parents, that if you put in the hard work, your children could go on music camps and things like this, on holiday. That was the hope. You can have that again.
I understand, he said, but we'll get you better. But if you forgive me for using the metaphor again, it was rather like a doctor who couldn't diagnose what's wrong with you, promising he'll get you well. And I think this is the fundamental problem.
But he has diagnosed, surely. He's diagnosed
so.
The free market isn't offering a solution, and we have been putting things in without getting decent reward back out.
That's not an analysis, that's a description, but it's not an analysis of how we got to this situation. And this is why, I'm a patriot, so I want the government to succeed. Right? I don't want British people to be the poorest in Europe. Yeah. I don't want our working class to suffer a higher penalty than anyone else's working class.
And they're not, to be fair, they're not the poorest in Europe.
They're amongst the poorest in Europe and doing the least well. And we've been in decline since even before the 2008 economic crisis. And we have departed from the medium living standards in both America and Europe. And there's a sense here that all of our politicians, left and right, are adrift, and nobody has an analysis that can direct us to where that's coming from. It's like we're on the brink of the 60s or the early 70s again, where we become the sick man of Europe. Mm-hmm. And that's where we are, and that's where I feel the gap is in Labour's offer. Where I thought his speech
I think you're looking for something too academic that would actually go over the heads of lots of ordinary people.
It doesn't go over the head. Successful politicians...
It will go over my head almost.
Well, that may say more about you than the ordinary voter. But the point is successful politics connects analysis to policy, and that's missing. Where I think Starmer did do well, and where I think it was moving, was two things. What I felt for much of politics in this country is we don't understand the class penalty in this country, the penalty that people pay for being working class, because we're all grown up in Britain. You can tell people's class position in a millisecond, and they pay an enormous penalty for that, way above sex, race, gender, anything else. Yes. Okay, and it was moving to hear him talk about that, and that was his motivation. And I think that's noble.
The basis of the Labour Party.
Noble.
Gentlemen, ding ding, end of round one. We have to move on. Thank you very much, Philip Lloyd. Superb, great start to the show. Thanks, my panel. Now, coming up next, Labour vows to crack the whip on knife crime and halve it within a decade. I think we've heard that one before. I'll be speaking to a grandmother and a knife crime campaigner who lost her grandson in a tragic, fatal stabbing next. And later on, we'll lift the lid on Labour's murky property deal that will see homeless people from one of London's most dangerous boroughs housed in luxury flats in a small town in Hampshire. It's all right for some.
breakfast every day from 6 a.m.
Good morning, everybody. I honestly don't think Gen Z are as lazy as we've been made out. I was on GBNews a couple of months ago talking about a report which suggested that they were very lazy, very work shy, and I honestly don't think that's the case. I respect my elders, so I'm certainly not going to sit here and blame them for the slow return to many offices across the country. But I am actually 20. I've run businesses since I was 15 and 16, since I dropped out of school, and I have always been pro-office, right? So I fit right into that Generation Z category, and I think the office environment is fantastic, not just professionally but socially for young people, especially kind of after COVID, and it halted a lot of their social plans or people going to university, etc. I think getting people into the office, being surrounded by the more senior people, the people with more experience, which is what we're talking about, older people, is actually incredibly positive. But I think Generation Z get a lot of stick in the media, and I'm often sat here debating this about them being called lazy. I guess I think probably what's different is technology is advanced, so people's jobs are a lot quicker, and Generation Z have obviously grew up with that technology, therefore in a position to do jobs quicker. And I guess that's kind of where that kind of narrative has come from, because Gen Z do really kind of go with the whole work smarter, not harder kind of mentality, which is often met with a little bit of stick.
I'm not knocking the young generation at all. I mean, I'm just saying it's by experience. Undoubtedly, they're not as hard-working as the more experienced worker, but I'm certainly not knocking them on that basis. If they had the opportunity, I'm sure there'd be more and more would want to get into the workplace. But unfortunately, I think this COVID has changed the world, and it's made younger people more lazy than older people. Older people just can't wait to, well, shouldn't say that, can't wait to get out of the house to get to work.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for Nigel Farage. Now, I've got a couple of your comments here, and of course they're all sausage-related, over Sir Keir Starmer's battering he took earlier. Robert says this: so Sir Keir Savaloy thought he'd take a break from the usual porkies and address the crowd at the Labour Party hot dog derby. I'm sure he's not too bothered about calling the hostages sausages. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Taking away the fuel from pensioners, it won't only be pigs in blankets this Christmas. I see we did there. Nice stuff. Now, moving on to a more serious story. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has pledged to take back our streets.
This Labour government will bring in new laws to crack down on dangerous online sales and the gangs who draw children in, alongside new youth hubs to steer young people away from violence, a teenage sure start to build hope in the future. And we will make it a mission for our whole country to halve knife crime in a decade, and yes, this Labour government will pass Ronan's Law, a ban on ninja swords.
Well, it's a noble sentiment, but have we heard it all time and time before? A party conference laden with policy announcements included the introduction of a ban on ninja swords and the introduction of youth hubs, aiming to prevent knife crime among young people. Earlier this year, the Conservative Party also planned to halve knife crime within a decade, something which left campaigners asking for much, much more. And joining me now is Judy Taylor, the knife crime campaigner and the grandmother of knife crime victim Liam Taylor, who died in 2020. Welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to have your company, Judy. Judy, before we get on to the policy today and the Home Secretary's announcement, would you mind sharing with our viewers what happened to Liam?
So nearly 5 years ago, that's how long I've been campaigning, Liam was brutally murdered outside a pub in Writtle in Essex. He was stabbed 6 times by 3 individuals that are serving a prison sentence. And this attack was 39 seconds from start to finish, but 13 of those seconds were directed completely on Liam. And in those 13 seconds, he had 6 stab wounds and 28 separate injuries. So just over a year ago, I gave up full-time employment, my job, and I campaigned non-stop to change laws, to change mindsets, to place life-saving equipment in the community and just try everything I can so no one else has to feel like our family feel.
And Judy, the tragedy that happened to you, you've tried to make into positive work. You're trying to change lives. You're trying to reach into young people's lives, in particular to make them think twice about carrying knives and the consequences that can have for them and those who they may choose to attack. What do you make of the announcement today by Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, to halve knife crime within a decade? Do you feel you've heard that so many times before, Judy Taylor? Do you have any faith in that?
Not really. I don't think any campaigner has. I'd love to think it was true. It would be absolutely amazing. But the thing is, it's zero tolerance now. It's gone on for too long. Every day there's someone getting stabbed or murdered, and the kids are getting younger and younger. You know, it's horrendous. And I know it's not an overnight fix, and I know there's not one simple answer. We go around in circles about this all the time. We all say the same thing, you know, but we've got to do something that's really drastic now. This is a time where everybody's had enough. Nobody can take anymore.
And Julie, in terms of banning the sale of zombie knives and machetes and swords, I mean, you may ask, why on earth are they on sale in the first place? But Julie, exactly. you know full well, don't you, that a knife from IKEA, any knife, can be a fatal weapon. Yeah. All these policies, they sound good, but they're just tokenistic.
Yeah. So they should never have been invented in the first place. It was greed and profit and just, you know, the youth thinking, well, mine's bigger than yours, or, you know, it's a fashion statement almost lately. My fear is that the knives that are still on the streets, the black market ones, so to speak, are now worth a lot more. That the individuals that are carrying these knives are not going to want to hand them into amnesty bins. Every knife off the street is fantastic. Of course, let's get every single knife off the street. Every one we take off is great, but there's just so much more work to be done. And I always say education starts at home. You know, I was with some parents last week. We met up with a local newspaper. One of those poor parents, her son was killed in her own house by one of her own kitchen knives. You know, and it's absolutely horrendous. You don't think that's going to happen to you. You never think it's going to happen to your family. And this is what I constantly tell everyone that I preach to. You know, you don't think it's going to happen to you, but it can happen to anybody. And I'm living proof of that.
Well, Judy Taylor, thank you so much for joining us on the show, sharing your story, and thank you for the work you do. I know you work tirelessly to try and save lives. Thank you very, very much. That's back to the studio now, and I'm still joined by my panel, the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle, and also Philip Blond, the former advisor to David Cameron. Lloyd, may I start with you this time? A laudable aim to halve knife crime. When you speak to Judy there, has little faith in politicians, heard it time and time again. Why is this time any different?
Well, this time I think there is a determination to try and deal with some of the root causes of it. I'm not quite sure we've got a proper analysis of what all those root causes are, because it is multifaceted. But we have seen a complete destruction of youth services in our country from 15 years ago. And the rebuilding of youth services in what they're calling youth hubs, but you know, same difference, isn't it? Rebuilding of youth services where every young person has somewhere to go, something to do, and an adult to talk to is key. But we need to go further on this as well. We need to see this partly as some of these public health messages, just like we do with seatbelts, where there are prime time TV and internet adverts that basically explain to people that not wearing a seatbelt is a pretty rubbish thing to do because you will get injured, you will end up injuring your friends.
It all sounds very touchy-feely. TV ads, ping-pong tables, youth clubs.
Yes.
Surely the answer is to clamp down harder rather than sort of try to...
Well, the ban is, of course, clamping down, banning those weapons that are particularly the most lethal, because they, of course, when they go in, cause more damage than the IKEA knife that you described, because they're designed to destroy flesh. But we have a relatively zero-tolerance policy of knife crime at the moment. It's not a soft-touch system in the criminal justice. What the government has been trying to do is have zero tolerance for the last 15 years, and it's not worked. So what we, of course, need to continue that zero tolerance, but we need to add it to an idea that if you are carrying a knife, you are a social pariah rather than a social hero, which is what happens at the moment in some of those gangs that then kind of celebrate the fact that those people are carrying knives.
Lloyd, before I move on to Philip, the Labour Party said they're going to halve knife crime.
Yep.
The worst places in Britain for knife crime are London and the West Midlands, currently ran by Labour mayors. Why should we believe anything Yvette Cooper says?
Well, the West Midlands has only been run by a Labour mayor for the last
the Labour councils, the local constituencies. The cities are all run by the Labour Party.
It was a Conservative mayor until 8 months ago. But you are right that there is a problem. You can't deal with this just in isolated areas without the funding for youth services and without a proper national resetting of the norm of the standards that we expect people to behave by. And that needs to be done in a clever way. It can't just be you and me going on TV saying it's an absolute disgrace, don't carry a knife around. It needs to be done with the right messages and setting a cultural standard that if you carry a knife, it's not only that you'll get locked up, but actually that your community think that you're a waste of space.
But I don't think that's going to happen, though, is it, Philip? Because we have offenders on the shows so often, and they say to them the choice is simple. If I don't carry a knife, it's riskier than if I do. They'd rather go to jail than be dead. How do you break that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is knife crime is a pursuit by a very hardened, small minority of people. Creating social pariahs around it has already happened. What we have are violent criminal gangs, organised, and a lot of this is around drugs, not all of it. But one of the most effective approaches is stop and search, around which there's huge levels of fear on the part of the police from doing so at scale. And the people who die mostly are young black men in London who are most often the victims, but also more often than not the carriers of such instruments. We really need a hard level of intervention into the criminal gangs and criminal networks that terrify young people so they do carry a knife. And it's that level of intervention that's absent, I think. And it's only working at that level that I think will do anything. Youth hubs, I remember that from like the 1980s. It's really ping pong tables are not going to stop this. What we need is direct intervention into the networks that propagate this.
But how youth hubs work is the ping pong table is the facade. That's the whole point.
But they don't work.
No, they do work. Actually, the evidence is that they work very well.
So cars open loads of youth clubs. Well, crime's going up.
Actually, youth clubs in the capital, there is still less than we had in 2010. So this idea that there's some on-sides, there's these super youth clubs that have opened up every now and again, which are nice. But what you do is you have the ping-pong table, and then you have the adult who is supervising, who is monitoring, who is trained and skilled, who can then pick out the problem kids, and then can say, well, no, you're being dragged into these gangs, we will stop it.
Lloyd, game, set and match. We have to end the ping-pong conversation now. That's moving on. Thank you very much to Philip and Lloyd. The ghost of COVID pass is still haunting the shop owners of a Surrey town whose councillors refuse to remove social distancing bollards that are killing their businesses.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office on GB News. It's going to turn dry for most overnight tonight. It's been a much drier day across England compared to Monday and the weekend, but there is more rain to come across the south tomorrow as this weather system starts to approach. It was this low that brought the heavy rain over the previous 48 hours. That has been clearing away, but we're still seeing quite wet conditions over northeast Scotland today. We've also had this northerly wind, which is introducing cooler air across much of the country overnight tonight. But the showers are tending to fade. We will see a few more across southern England and South Wales. It will stay quite mild here, double digits, but elsewhere with that cooler air coming in, we're into single figures and some pockets of frost likely across parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning. We'll still have a few showers coming in first thing as well, getting into northern Scotland. But these central parts of Scotland, that blue hue on the map, that is telling us, yes, temperatures are going to be down to freezing or a touch below through some sheltered glens. A bright start there for much of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunshine tomorrow, just 1 or 2 showers along the north coast. Perhaps a few showers over northern England, but a good part of northern England, North Wales, actually having a fine day tomorrow. Quite grey to begin with across southern counties of England and Wales. And here comes the rain, just edging back in, initially across southwest England, South Wales, but spreading more widely over southern England and up towards the Midlands come the afternoon. As I mentioned, much of northern England, Northern Ireland, a good chunk of Scotland actually, just dry and bright tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. But it will be on the cool side, temperatures struggling into the low teens. A little milder further south, but not feeling all that mild with the wind and the outbreaks of rain, which will push north on Thursday and could cause some further issues as this line of rain kind of grinds to a halt. So we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place over much of northeast England, parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and North Wales also seeing a wet day, but in the south turning a little milder and a little brighter on Thursday.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for Mr Farage. Now, a bustling Surrey shopping street has been left practically abandoned after bollards installed for social distancing in 2020 resulted in a reduction in traffic and therefore a dramatic fall in trade. However, the council took it one step further and made the bollards permanent, something which it claims has actually made shopping along the street more attractive. Well, the leader of Surrey County Council, Tim Oliver, said the street was previously a very busy and dangerous rat run, but is now much easier to find parking places, and it is a pleasantly quiet road to visit for shopping or enjoying the hospitality businesses. Well, let's find the other side of the story now, because joining me is one of the business owners on that very street, Laura Slee. She's the owner of Piahe, a ladies' boutique shop. Welcome to the show, Laura. A pleasure to have your company. Tell us about this well-meaning social distancing measure, a low-traffic neighbourhood by any other name, and how it's impacted your business and decimated the street.
It's had a huge effect on everyone on the road, every single business, new ones, well-established ones. We've all seen the effects, and every year the road just gets quieter and quieter in terms of footfall. People are avoiding coming up the road now, as they know after years of experience of driving up that road that they can't get through. So they just avoid it altogether.
And Laura, I saw some photographs, some heartbreaking photographs of abandoned premises, of shops that have closed down. In terms of the impact, how can you tell us financially, has it impacted you and other businesses on the run that you know?
Oh, definitely. I think I don't know of one business that hasn't been affected on our road. Some have taken their business to other towns in order to try and find the footfall again. Others have chosen to move to the high street and pay a higher rent in hopes that more people will find them. And we are considering our options at the moment. Because by the looks of it, Surrey isn't wanting to change a single thing from their responses.
Why do you think that is? I suspect I know the answer. It's all about the environment. It's all about saving the planet. But they're not saving the planet isn't doing much good if they're not saving your business and saving the local community. The aggro having to go right the way around the block just to get to you.
Exactly. I'm stumped, in all honesty. I have suggested a compromise of priority give way. I've had no response from them at all. It's just been a blank no. We are not looking to change anything. We know that traffic patterns have changed since COVID, but we won't be changing anything. That's the only response I'm getting.
OK, and thank you very much for joining us on the show. Superb. Now, pubs could be forced to close their doors early under nanny state measures to target harmful drinking now in a move to roll back the continental cafe style of drinking culture introduced by Sir Tony Blair. Andrew Gwynn, the Public Health Minister, said the government was considering tightening up the hours of operation of boozers. But are Labour taking the right approach? Well, I'm still joined in the studio by my panel, and that's the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moore and Philip Blond, the former advisor to David Cameron. Philip, let's start with you this time. When the Labour Party came in, Sir Keir Starmer promised to tread lightly on all of our lives. We've seen a clampdown on policing. We've seen an outdoor smoking ban proposed for outside pubs, football grounds, and now the tendrils of the state move into how long we're allowed to have a pint. Why are they poking their nose into our business so much?
Well, it's rather depressing, isn't it? For a socialist party, they're really clamping down on any social aspects that one might enjoy. Look, I think this is part of a wider trend that is really disturbing. I was at the Labour Party conference and I was talking to a representative of the Musicians' Union, and they're talking about how clubs are closing down, venues are closing down, and we no longer have a British youth culture that has a platform to perform. London now, its nightlife is virtually absent because the city itself is being suppressed, all of its joy and vitality. And I think it's a mistake. I think we've got to allow people late night places for conviviality, for conversation. It's key to human life. It's part of what a vibrant city should be. And I think one doesn't need to crack down on harmful drinking by closing the venues where kind of different approaches could take place. I mean, Tony Blair was right in trying to introduce kind of a new culture around these spaces, and just shutting the spaces is a deeply harmful and retrograde step, in my view.
And Lloyd, do you think there's a feeling that the Labour Party won't be happy until we're a nation of Jeremy Corbyns, teetotal vegans who don't smoke and have to cycle everywhere? There's zero aspiration in that. Why can't the Labour Party just back out and let the market decide?
Well, you know this story's not true. You know that...
It was briefed by the Labour Health Minister.
No. The Labour Health Minister said in a conversation, in a round table that you have at these conferences, free-flowing, not prepared, we need to look at lots of things. He listed lots of things they needed to look at, sugar, and then he said, and maybe we need to even look at some of the things around pub opening times. Immediately within an hour, the Labour Party said, no, we're not looking at this. This was a slip of the tongue.
Why even mention sugar, fat, smoke,
but what I'm just saying is, on this story,
LTNs.
We know it's not true. However, on the wider issue, I think there is sometimes a misunderstanding of how you make people healthy. The more we have clamped down on alcohol drinking by young people, and the more that we have clamped down on messages about how bad alcohol is, alcohol abuse has gone up in this country, not gone down. All the public health messaging on alcohol has been a complete failure in the last 10 years. The other thing that I would say is the number of harms that alcohol is caused in France is pretty similar to the amount of alcohol harm that's caused in Britain. It's a different kind of alcohol harm, but it's about the number per head is about the same. So this idea that the Europeans are great and we're somehow some awful drunks, I'm afraid, is rubbish. The best way of dealing with alcohol harm is introduce alcohol to young people at a very young age in the family, where you get responsible drinking, allow parents to take their children to pubs and bars when they are underage and give them a shandy, get them used to drinking, get them socialised, and then they drink responsibly. And do it in venues, not doing it at the home. So you want more venues opened and you want less home drinking.
I think that's lucid and wise, and I think that we need to integrate alcohol with other aspects of our culture rather than having a mono approach to drinking. And that's
okay, gentlemen, after call time on the conversation. Thank you very much, Philip Blond, and also, of course, Lloyd Russell-Moore. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you to my panel. Now, coming up next, a superb exclusive. A Labour-led council is palming its homeless people onto a Hampshire council who can barely house its own needy population. But even more shockingly, they'd be housed in luxury apartments which cost double the market rate. Look at those pictures. A prince will be delighted to live there, let alone a homeless family from London. More on that soon with the council whistleblower exclusively next.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Luis Elizondo says that he worked at the Pentagon and that he knows that they have recovered material that is not from this Earth. He resigned after believing his government wasn't taking the threat of UFOs seriously. So have they been covering up alien material from us?
I don't think the claims that are being made in Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, are new, but I think what we have to pay attention to is the seniority of, one, Luis Elizondo, and two, the people who recruited him, and indeed the people he worked for, which was the Department of Defence and the Pentagon.
You think that he was in a position to know about this?
Yeah, he would have been. He would have been speaking to the individuals who were taking part in these investigations. You're showing some of those clips just now that potential incursions by objects controlled by a non-human intelligence, potentially. We're not saying alien necessarily, but something non-human.
Seems a bit far-fetched to me, Andrew. I'm a sceptic.
When people say sceptical, I think as a species, we're relatively new in terms of what we do in space. But right now, we've got a robot on Mars that drives about and has a little helicopter drone that every so often comes up, flies about away 10 feet from it to collect samples and comes back. Now, a species a couple of hundred years down the line from us would have far better technology than that. So who's to say what we're encountering aren't just really advanced probes from something else that's just slightly ahead of us in the technological scale? I don't think that's too far stretch of the imagination.
When you do see things like what we just saw there, which was made public, the New York Times did a big expose on all of this, and actually, you know, the world didn't end. We weren't all outside fighting each other for scraps of food and burning down the nearest Lidl, were we? We just thought, oh, that's quite cool.
I think now we have to look at it and maybe take a step back, look at the people coming out now, talking about UFOs and thinking, is there something to this that we've maybe been overlooking?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Dawber, on the final furlong. Now, the Labour-controlled Council of Newham is shipping out some of its 6,500 homeless people 40 miles east to a small town in Hampshire. Farnborough Town, best known for its air shows, will house people in a luxury, newly built apartment building called, appropriately, Savoy Place. Now, as you can see on your screens, the futuristic block boasts panoramic views, elegant furnishings, tasteful wooden flooring, fully fitted brand new kitchens, and even opulent marble-lined bathrooms. Fit for a prince, let alone a homeless family from inner London. But the sting in the tail is that nobody in the local area has even been consulted. But tonight's GB News can exclusively look through the keyhole of this murky property deal. And joining me now is the whistleblower on the story, the former Conservative councillor for Hampshire County Council, Maurice Sheehan. Maurice, welcome to the show. An astonishing story of the locals not being told about it, being kept in the dark about it. Tell me, how on earth can this be allowed to happen?
Absolutely. We were really surprised to actually discover that this negotiations had been going on between Newham and the developer, particularly in our own area in Rushmore, where we've got 2,000 people waiting for housing on our housing register. So, you know, there's enormous pressure there. House prices are really expensive, so young people are struggling to get onto the housing ladder. Yet suddenly a London borough with all its wealth can come down and just buy or lease this accommodation. And
that's a key point, Maurice. So, as I understand it, correct if I'm wrong, Newham Council is paying twice the market rate in Rushmore. It's pricing locals out of the market, and it's worth pointing out Newham is one of London's 10 most dangerous boroughs. Has there been any impact assessment, as far as you're aware, on things like children's facilities, on GPs, on schools, on the social facilities, or indeed the type of social problems they may bring to your constituency?
Those are the very issues that we're concerned about. We're not aware of any impact assessment having been done so far. I am aware of concerns which have been raised at Hampshire County Council, who provide these services, but these services locally are already overstretched. You know, people have got to wait ages for a GP appointment. Our local hospital, Frimley Park, is collapsing with RAC that the Wilson government back in the 60s built the hospital with. So you know, that's got to be rebuilt, even with West Streeting's recent announcements. And children's services, you know, they really are overstretched. So bringing more problem families into the borough, particularly into a building like this, which is right at the gateway of Farnborough, outside Farnborough Station. So anyone arriving in Farnborough, their first impression of Farnborough is going to be this block of flats full of homeless people from East London.
Now, does the council have any power to stop this? And if not, what's the point of them?
Yeah, I'm afraid the local borough council doesn't have any powers at all on that front, other than powers of persuasion to try to, persuade Newham that this isn't a good mix. But if Newham are determined to take up the lease of this, then they will arrive on our doorstep. But it will be our local services in schools and healthcare and whatnot, and the Hampshire County Council are going to have to pick up the influx of these people.
Now, I understand there's a council meeting on Thursday, is that right? And I hope a few locals might watch this tonight and get themselves along and let the council know exactly how they feel. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, Maurice Sheehan. Now, Rushmore Borough Council has given us a statement. A spokesman has said this: Rushmore Borough Council first considered the planning application for this development back in 2015, when planning permission was refused by the council's Development Management Committee on the grounds that it was not a suitable location for family dwellings. This was overturned on appeal and the development went ahead. The developers offered to lease the properties to us earlier this year, but at around twice the open market rental value locally, which we did not consider good value for local council taxpayers. The developer is now in negotiations to sign a lease with Newham Council, so they've admitted the story. Although we are not in a position to prevent this arrangement, we will take steps to ensure the developers meet all the planning conditions for the building. We will also work hard to ensure that Newham maintain their duty of care towards any of their residents that move there. In essence, a chocolate teapot. Now, coming up next is State of the Nation, and I'm joined, of course, by Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'm assuming, so Jake, you might be referring to a certain city sausage in your show tonight.
We're going to be talking about Secure sausage. I mean, Starmer, a terrible slip of the tongue to make, most extraordinary slip of the tongue, but also looking at his speech, because we've got another one of his handbrake turns. The economy's disastrous, it's all doom and gloom, we're all finished. Oh, the market's turned down, investors are running away. It's all marvellous, it's all fantastic. I assume the fact it's now so much better must be the fault of the Conservatives, because everything else seems to be. So we're going to look at another U-turn. We're going to look at, Lady Starmer turning up in somebody else's frock once again, which just strikes me as a little bit disdainful of the criticism.
Indeed. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, superb. That's coming next. State of the Nation. Thank you very much. And thank you to Morris for joining me on the show. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6. See you then. But first, it's time for your weather. And here's Alex Deegan. Have a fantastic evening.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office on GB News. It's going to turn dry for most overnight tonight. It's been a much drier day across England compared to Monday and the weekend, but there is more rain to come across the south tomorrow as this weather system starts to approach. It was this low that brought the heavy rain over the previous 48 hours. That has been clearing away, but we're still seeing quite wet conditions over northeast Scotland today.